Hello and welcome to the Wire Talks. I'm Sidharth Bhatia. Anyone who watches nightly television news will know that the Indian media, especially broadcasters, are virtual mouthpieces of the Modi government. They not only amplify and praise the government and its leader all the time, they also attack the opposition parties against all the conventions and ethics of journalism. And objectivity and balance are pretty much unknown. NDTV, the oldest news channel in India, was an outlier, a channel that stuck to a professional approach. Now, it looks like it may be taken over by an industrialist, Gautam Adani, who is close to the political establishment. What does it mean for NDTV? More importantly, what does it mean for the media landscape? Will the channel now become one more acolyte of the government and the ruling party? These are questions which our guest today, N.Ram, the well-known and well-respected former editor-in-chief of The Hindu and Frontline, will discuss and answer. N.Ram, welcome to the Wire Talks.
It's a pleasure, Sidharth.
So in the last 7 years or so, we have seen the sorry spectacle of the Indian media, especially television channels, becoming virtual lapdogs of the government, supporting it fully, attacking the opposition on everything. We have never seen this in India before. How and why did this happen?
I agree with you that, in fact, I'd go beyond that and say that we have among the worst news television channels in the world. 2 or 3 of them are adept at doing, or more maybe, are adept at doing hit jobs at opposition figures and even on the media, as we saw in the case of The Wire when the attack happened recently. So I think, yes, I fully agree with it. And I think that's because they put business in front. They are also afraid of the consequences to their businesses, both the media business and businesses beyond in some cases, or that they will be hit if you have critical voices, if you oppose policies, if you oppose, say, demonetization and so on. And I think that message has gone there. But even before they were driven to the wall, I think they caved in. You know, there's this lines about the British journalist by Humpert Wolff. It goes something like this. You can't hope to bribe or twist, thank God, the British journalist, but considering what the man will do unasked, there's no occasion to. And I think that really applies to some of our mainstream television channels and perhaps also sections of the mainstream press, although there are differences there. I mean, the categories are somewhat different.
You know, I've been wondering also whether there is a kind of ideological compatibility because, you know, even if you cave in down the line from the owner, the editor, and the reporters, they seem to be virtually participating in this entire, hatred and for the minorities, for example. Yeah. And can this happen reluctantly or does it happen with some kind of compatibility with the government's views and the BJP's views?
That's a good insight because some of them may actually agree with the majoritarian agenda. In a highly polarized situation, that's not been on the rampage. Fortunately, not everywhere across all regions in India. The South, by and large, put up a lot of resistance to this. But yes, I think some of that is willing. They are ideologically aligned with this, with the Hindutva, what I would call not just the BJP government, but with the Hindutva authoritarian regime, which is much wider and larger. So I think there is that ideological pull as well. But assuming that they want to do professional journalism, or that's how they started, I think there is also the fear, the message that has been sent out, the fear of consequences. But I think both these add together, and we have to go on a case-by-case basis to discover what are the factors that have resulted in this shameful situation. We start with the news television, but also I think in the case of some of the press. Although, a caveat, I think we must recognize that the situation is so diverse that there are still spaces across India, in particular states or regions, where independent voices, defiant voices rise from time to time and are allowed to have their space, because you can't suppress everything, or you can't establish total control, as happened, in fact, during the emergency. I remember that because the media, the landscape was completely different at that time. But I think they were so stunned that there was no effective resistance other than small underground publications. I remember that very well because I was very much part of that experience where we saw what happened to the media. And I don't think it's gone to that stage simply not because they wouldn't want it, but the regime, but because India is too vast, too diverse, to allow that to happen. So that's an important qualification, I think.
So I'm stating the obvious, but this is clearly a very, very unhealthy situation for a democracy where the citizen expects that the media will demand accountability, report accurately and objectively about what the government is doing, and also be the voice of the voiceless. That famous saying about, comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. Here it is, why isn't the citizen being shortchanged?
Absolutely. But then citizens are confused because of this hugely polarized situation, not witnessed since independence. Maybe there was some before that, what led up to partition, but certainly people are hugely confused. And in this situation, these attacks are quite effective. These pressures, these threats, the perception of risk, and the actual attacks, the raids, trying to criminalize journalism. In some cases, targeting especially Muslims. You saw Kapan affair or Mohammed Zubair, or even comedians being attacked, but also on a broader way, journalism being criminalized in a way that wouldn't have happened before. So I think it is that situation, but there are still spaces for independent voices like The Wire, like yours or mine, and also spaces within the so-called mainstream media, particularly the press. NDTV was a very good example, but I think the control has been passed on to the Adani group, and we'll have to see what happens. But it is certainly very unfortunate that the one channel that stood out, the English language channel that stood out, and also Ravish Kumar, very influential voice, and that I think that chapter has virtually ended.
I'll come to the NDTV situation in a minute. Can you think of, I know you said we are the worst in the world, but can you think of, say, any other society, democratic society, where it is a similar thing is happening, where there is some level of media capture, but for example, in countries where despotic democratic leaders have risen to the top. Is there any other example of this?
Sidharth, I don't know about non-English speaking countries, but I don't know what the situation would have been in Brazil under Bolsonaro, or Turkey and Turkey today and in the recent past, or Indonesia and so on. I don't know enough about it, but I'm not aware. I don't think in Pakistan you have such a situation, simply because no one political formation is totally dominant. It's very contested. In a contested space, this wouldn't happen. But if the opposition is so weak that it allows authoritarian tendencies to go on the rampage, as happened in India, I think we would expect this kind of performance by the media. So, but I'm not really aware of anybody else in a situation that is comparable to what we face. There must be. My instinct tells me there must be, but I don't know of anything really comparable right now.
I must confess, I don't know too much of the situation in Rwanda, but it reminds me about what's happened there in terms of, if you know about Radio Rwanda, which openly called for genocide. I don't know about the rest of the media there, but sometimes it feels like, in dramatic moments, it feels like this is exactly what is happening, where there are virtually open calls for, at least at the very least, there is bigotry and hate mongering, but also demonizing of minorities. And this could lead to consequences.
Yes, this could lead to consequences, and is already leading to some consequences, although it could get worse. But, the social media, this monstrous formation on the social media, orchestrated, is putting huge pressure, I think, alongside the direct attacks or the threats and so on from government agencies like the Enforcement Directorate or the police, including the CBI or the Income Tax Department. And the the way social media pounces on any independent voice. Of course, you can stand up and so on, but it's very difficult. Take, for example, women journalists, the way they have been abused, targeted, rape threats, pornographic content being fraudulently put on, and there is a virtual immunity that these people enjoy. People who post such messages or content enjoy on social media platforms. We know what happened with Facebook and so on. India has the largest number of Facebook users. By users, it's number one. Similarly, on Instagram. And the kind of messages that are put out and are tolerated by these platforms, I think is really quite a story. And it puts enormous pressure on journalism. So ideally, you should be insulated from this. You should, switch off from this. But in the real world, I think it's very difficult. People want to know what others are saying and so on, and they get into this into the cauldron. So I think other people have written about it, how this disinformation, which is motivated, which is deliberate, which is orchestrated and scaled up on these social media platforms, puts enormous pressure on the working journalist, on somebody who wants to be an honest professional journalist, coming out of, say, the Asian College of Journalism, with which I'm associated, or some other serious journalism school, or from wherever. They come out with idealism, increasing a lot of women come out. And then if this is the situation they face, I think that you have a real problem on your hands for the future of the news media and the future of journalism, professional journalism, journalism of integrity, ethical journalism, for which people like you, Sidharth, Vardarajan, M.K. Venu, or others are known. I think this is a real problem.
In this context, the NDTV imminent takeover or virtual takeover, or maybe it's already happened, as you saw Prannoy step down from the directorship of his company. It's surely worrying.
RRPR so far. That's
from RRPR, I think.
Yes.
But do you think that, and I don't want to get into his personal situation, but do you think that this was target that people close to the government were aiming at, and there was a financial vulnerability there because of past financial and investment decisions? So do you think that this was a targeted thing, or it's just an ordinary corporate takeover?
I think it was taking place over time. And actually, Mukesh Ambani bailed them out more than 12 years ago with this loan. And if you look at the SAT order, they said it is a commercial transaction. And although there were features that enabled them to take over, there were two factors in the loan agreement which were crucial for NDTV's survival and even flourishing under very difficult circumstances. One was no editorial interference, and it never happened. I know this for a fact. It's written there and it was honored. The second thing is an interest-free loan. But I think NDTV, it was unfortunate. They encountered a global situation beyond their control, a financial crisis, 2008, 2009, which I think put an end, which really undermined their plans for expansion and so on. They got into a very difficult financial situation, and to the credit of Reliance and Mr. Mukesh Ambani himself, I think that loan, although it had clauses that it would, in future, it had the potential to be taken over, that option was never exercised for 12 years, for which I think credit must be given. And the good work that NDTV did during this period was in significant part, enabled by this loan. And NDTV came back despite all those attacks by enforcement, by CBI, income tax, attacks which, in my opinion, are completely unjust and sometimes over the top, because the process is the punishment. Eventually, nothing may happen, but you have to go through this process, and it's faced a situation which I think no other significant media organization in India has faced so far. So I know about it quite a lot. And I think this loan agreement definitely helped them. But it couldn't go on for too long. And for some reason, ownership was transferred. Acquisition was possible at that time. But for that period, for that good period, for television journalism, I think some credit must go to a major business organization which came to their aid and support. Financial vulnerability, absolutely. But then NDTV, fought back spiritedly, went to state governments, got advertising revenue, and actually turned the corner in terms of operations. And I think that's very creditable for the journalists. It shows that good journalism, independent journalism, is viable and can even be profitable despite all the challenges that come their way. But that chapter has ended. It is my understanding that control has passed over. They have, I don't think the Roys are going to continue in this.
We'll be right back after this short break.
Welcome back to the Wire Talks.
What I was asking, Ram, is do you think that therefore, knowing this situation of NDTV, this Adani takeover by another group, an industrial group known to be very, very close to Mr. Modi and to the government, do you think it was targeted that we know that NDTV is in this situation, let's go after it because it's way too independent? Do you think that, or is it just an ordinary business transaction?
It is no ordinary business transaction. It's, I think NDTV, they found NDTV very uncomfortable and wanted to put an end to at least the Roy's control of NDTV, their stewardship of NDTV. And I think Mr. Adani was trying for some time to acquire this, and but there was this bar, it was in the hands of somebody else, the control, not the control, but the keys to the control, if you like. And so I think it happened eventually, but it lasted pretty long. So I don't think it was just an ordinary business decision. I saw Mr. Gautam Adani's, I read the interview published in the Financial Times, where he said he wants to take it global, NDTV, a global brand, India's first global brand, like the Financial Times or Al Jazeera, he said. And he offered Prannoy Roy chairmanship, he said, for this. So the problem is you want to have credibility. If it's seen to be a propagandistic organ, NDTV is turned into that, then I think it has no value for the purposes he mentioned. He said that the cost is quite negligible for the conglomerate, Adani conglomerate. But so it's a responsibility rather than anything else, he said. He said various interesting things there. But I think credibility is going to be very important. And there are still journalists in NDTV who have credibility. Srinivasan Jain, Nidhi Rasdan, a number of others, younger ones also, Sanket, and so on. They have credibility and skills. They have experience also to back this up. So that chapter is yet to be covered. But so he's facing the problem of doing this global thing. He's also said something very interesting, Mr. Adani, in this interview. By all means, criticize the government when it goes wrong, but you also should have the courage to highlight, to say it's done very well when it's particularly on the development agenda. I don't think there's any need to say that. That's obvious that if you agree with something that the government thinks is doing that you think is good, you are, as a professional journalist, at least in your editorials, you're going to support that if you believe that that is right. Because it's not just reporting. You also offer opinions, you engage in disputation, in criticism, but you could easily be supportive of something. Say the midday meal scheme is announced or something like that for all over. You will support it. It goes without saying. So why do you have to say you must have the courage to credit the government for its development agenda, in effect? So that suggests a change. I don't think you or Prannoy Roy or somebody would say that. It's obvious and so I think there's a message there that there could be a major change. But on the other hand, credibility. How do you win credibility, especially if you want to go global, to establish a global brand? So I think there is really a tension between these two goals, as stated as revealed in his interview to the Financial Times. I think that's the one place where he's spoken out on what his plans.
So joining the dots, his proximity to the government, his statements, and the fact that NDTV was, say, the last man standing in a sense, in terms of television channels at least, where there was some integrity, some professionalism. If you join all the dots, do you think that, would you assess it as or predict it as a situation where NDTV is definitely going to now go the way of other channels, or it's going to start becoming another voice, maybe a more sophisticated voice, but a more pro-government voice? Fundamentally, my question is, are you pessimistic?
Yes, I think it's a very unfortunate thing. I've already said it to the Financial Times and so on much earlier, as soon as the news broke. I think it's very unfortunate that control has passed out. I think it's already happened, it's been transferred from the hands of the Roys, who are really icons in the Indian news television space, also pioneers. So it's passed, and that's, I think, going to be very unfortunate. And whether it was Mr. Adani or some other industrialists close to who support they say we support the development agenda, but that's much more than just economic development. So I think it'll be very unfortunate because these pressures will operate and their own interests will be pursued. But whether it'll be like other channels, those channels which do hit jobs, I don't want to preempt. Let's give it a chance and see how the new NDTV with the new ownership, the new controllers is going to function, because it still has all these journalists done on the whole a wonderful job for the channel and for Indian news television and for the Indian news media. So I think we have to give it a chance in all fairness. But it's very unfortunate that control has been lost by the Roys. But then they've they've been at it for a very long time. So you can't expect this to go on forever, I guess.
Why do industrialists want to own television channels? Nobody is making big money. Eventually, television watching will taper down because everything is moving on the phone and on other devices. People are watching less and less news. Why do they want to own these channels? Why not get into something else which makes more money?
Not for business purposes at all. It's something you would like to acquire because in some cases it could be vanity. It depends on the individual case. In some cases, supporting their whole strategy, business or even political strategy. In some cases, of businessmen or business persons. There are, I think, complex reasons, but certainly it's not for profit. And in fact, Mr. Adani in this interview said that it's a negligible cost for the conglomerate to take it global, given all their other plans and so on. And that's how you'd see it. But I think you already see it happen in India. But it's so diverse that there are different forms of ownership still, which is what gives me some hope. We can't throw in the towel on this, but I can see the reasons why business persons, big business, would seek to acquire this voice because they want to influence public opinion. They want to curry favor with the government in some cases. I don't want to name names. It could be the central government or even state governments. And you can exercise a lot of influence and power. It opens doors in many cases if you're in the media. So I think there are, but Sidharth, I also want to mention that in the old days, big business houses which are cautious would avoid getting into media because they knew, I know that, for example, the Tatas, I think, although the statesman, ownership of the statesman was there, but they never interfered. They never dabbled in the media space because of good reasons. A different kind of a business group with different ethics would do that. They didn't want to get into any contested space, any controversial space unconnected with their business. That was the old approach, but now it's completely changed.
Actually, for a long, long time, Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani said, why should I own a newspaper when I have friends in other publications? And the Ambanis were doing very well without newspapers. And he said that it's a headache to own a newspaper till they started something which lasted for exactly 3 to 4 years. And that was the end of it. But now It's interesting to see that Mr. Mukesh Ambani owns a massive TV channel and digital enterprise. So, and now we've seen what is happening here. So being an editor, being a mentor, you're very much on the involved with the Asian College of Journalism, which is producing great journalists. I look back on when I began, and now I think, why would a young person want to join journalism if that young person has ideals and she has ethics and she has plans and she wants to bring the real voice of the country in front of society, the voice of the people? Where does she go? Is journalism dead as we know it? I'm positing this.
No, I hope not, and I don't think so either. I also have raised the same question. Why are they coming? Say in our Asian College of Journalism, year after year, 65% of the intake is female. Women come here with idealism, well-educated from different parts, drawn from all sections of society. The scholarships are also provided there for people who can't afford the fees. They come every year. And one of the things that they are told right in the curricula, during the classes, during the programs, is that don't expect all this to prevail in the newsroom when you go there. You will encounter problems. They get jobs also. I think several hundreds of them are still very active in the Indian media and some abroad also. And they encounter different situations, but they come with the spirit of idealism. By and large, some of them exit journalism. They've gone into what they've learned. They use in other areas, like including investment and so on, or starting the startups, including financial startups in finance. So they do that. But this question I ask myself year after year, why are they coming here to study? Particularly young women, but it's also others, people who are very well qualified because they already have a degree. It could be engineering, or we even had a dentist come to journalism, people with the law who already have law degrees. They come in. So I think there is that, I wouldn't like to say it residual, but there is the young spirit of wanting to do something and wanting to change the world in some ways, or keep up with progressive trends, work for justice. So I think I see that spirit, and that's one reason why when we go to to places like our ACJ, Asian College of Journalism, but I don't want to advertise it too much on this platform. That's my only experience. We get recharged when we go and discuss with these students. We have a course with Bloomberg course for financial and business journalism also. And when we talk to them, there's some very bright young people there who have clearly given up the prospect of getting into more paying jobs, more lucrative jobs, careers here or there, and still come to journalism, which means something must be right with the situation here. Something must be right with the situation here.
But where do they go?
They get into the mainstream media.
I understand that. No. My question, somewhat provocative, is if this is the situation in the real world and they are going to be perhaps compromised or disillusioned or just feel frustrated, is journalism per se has journalism got a future at all, is my question.
Yes, I think because the hope is the political dispensation will change for the better, and this kind of authoritarianism will have its day. It will come to an end at some point through elections, through peaceful democratic processes in the Indian case. So I think that's the hope. And there is basically, I think India is too large for any one individual or one formation to keep suppressed all the time. That's my belief. I really believe in that. And you can wait it out. Things will change sometimes unexpectedly, but you can also work for it. At the moment, the best hope is in what is called political federalism, where regional parties pulling in different directions. You can't guarantee the future, but they are an alternative to the party that is dominant, the political formation that is dominant. And we hope alongside that, the situation will improve for journalism. And when that happens, these young people will be great assets. But even today, you can provide resistance within the news media. It's not all lost. That's my hope. And I'm sure people like you also are tempted to share that.
Well, frankly, I'm, as they say nowadays, on the same page as you on this, because having seen journalism and politics in this country for many, many years, I've seen ups and downs, and things change dramatically. So it's not that all hope is gone. I speak to young journalists, young people, and they ask me similar questions. Why should I get in? Why should I not go into corporate relations, which pays a lot, which is less hassles? But I find people coming in. We get a lot of people. Others must be getting a lot of applications. New independent avenues are opening up. So I share your optimism and hope for the future. Frankly, on this is a lovely note to conclude on, to say that as two professional journalists, you're much more senior. We feel that journalism, as we know it and as we hope it is practiced, is not dead. So
well said. I second that.
Thank you for this well-rounded understanding, explanation and analysis of the Indian media scene and of Adani, takeover of NDTV. That was N.Ram, the distinguished editor, former editor-in-chief of The Hindu and Frontline, giving his views on the media landscape of today. We'll be back again next week with another guest. Till then, goodbye from me, The Wire Talks, Sidharth, Bhatia, and the team. Bye.